Radioacktiva, man. How are you? It's great meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm excited to chat.
So are we. It's going to be your first time in Colombia performing. Have you ever been here before?
I've never been to Colombia and very excited to be going for the first time and experiencing Bogota and seeing what you guys have to offer.
Yeah, I hope you had some days off. Usually bands come so fast and they have a hectic tour schedule. So hopefully
that's
you
the
have
story
some
of our
time.
lives, you know.
Yeah. Since it's the first time you're gonna be in our country, I'm sure you get asked this a lot. But when does one discover that has a voice that resembles the voice of Freddie Mercury?
I didn't grow up listening to Queen at all, so I didn't even really know who Freddie Mercury was until people started telling me that I sound like him. I formed a band in 1999, and we started touring, and we ended up eventually moving down to the United States. And after every single concert we would do, people would come up to me and say, "You know who you sound like?" And it became a joke after a while. I was like, man, I'm going to try tonight to not sound like Freddie Mercury. I'm going to sound like Marc Martel, but it never worked. And so I just accepted that, a lot of people hear Freddie Mercury in my voice, but I never thought it was anything special, honestly.
What were you listening to when you discovered that, when people start approaching you and telling you that you sounded like Freddie?
What was I listening to?
Yeah, what was your kind of music?
I mean, in the 90s, I listened to a lot of grunge. I was a big Pearl Jam fan. And the early 2000s, I got into like the Killers, and I guess that was a little bit later. That was 2005, but I was Jeff Buckley. I don't know if you know who that is. He's an incredible singer who died very young. I was a big, in the 80s, I was a big George Michael fan, Richard Marx, any male singer with like a high voice, I was really into.
Oh, that's very cool. But I guess it becomes something inevitable, right? You're like trying to do something that resembles this guy who they've told you sound like, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was inedible, honestly. I for a good 10 years of my life, I was just making music with my own band, singing my own songs. And just really, I'd accepted that I was always going to be compared to this guy, Freddie Mercury. And obviously, I became a fan of Queen maybe in the early, mid-2000s. I bought their Greatest Hits album, and I was like, oh yeah, this is really great stuff. And this guy, Freddie Mercury, used his voice to the max. And I think that was kind of just part of his personality to always push himself to the limits. And my personality is a little bit different. I'm a little bit more conservative. I preserve my energy a little bit more. And I guess the difference there is that I very rarely lose my voice because I'm very careful with it, protecting it. Whereas you can find many, many videos of Freddie Mercury when he can barely sing, just because he was just always giving himself. I forgot what the question was. What was the question?
Actually, me too. It was just glad to hear you telling the story. So,
yeah, I kind of got down a tangent. I don't even know where I was going with that. But my voice, I don't know. Kind of lost my train of thought.
Don't worry, man. Don't worry. I'm glad because I'm also a big fan of Jeff Buckley. Great record.
Yeah,
I'm a big Pearl Jam fan too.
Yeah.
So it's great. Since, of course, it wasn't like the music of your generation, the music you grew up with, Queen. Do you remember like the first time you say like, okay, I'm gonna try and listen to these bands since everybody's telling me that I sound like Freddie Mercury?
Yeah, I do remember. It was in the early 2000s. It was actually my bass player, Glenn. I remember we were driving. For some reason, this memory stayed in my mind. We were on tour in our 15-passenger van, pulling a trailer, and we were in Chicago late at night, like 12 midnight in Chicago, and it was like bumper-to-bumper traffic. And I was like, man, this city is crazy. There's traffic late at night like this. And we were just sitting there and, just bored. And my bass player, Glenn, says, Mark, you should really you should really, I'd encourage you to listen to some Queen. You know, people tell you sound like him naturally, and I really think that you just sound like him without trying. Because the way that I sound, the way that I learned to sing, I never took voice lessons. I just listened to other singers and try to do what they do and try to make it my own thing, like Jeff Buckley, like George Michael, and people like that. Actually, I did a little bit too much of Eddie Vedder, and you can hear it in the early recordings of my old band down here. In the first record especially, you can hear a little bit of leftover of Eddie Vedder in my voice, and it's like, it's not good. But yeah, it was in the early 2000s, and after, when my bass player said that to me, that's when I soon after that, I purchased the greatest hits album of Queen.
Okay, and when did the whole Queen experience became a part of your creative life?
You can definitely start to hear Queen influence in my music in the late 2000s. We did an album called Ending is Beginning, and there's one song in particular, My Last Amen by Down Here. You can definitely hear it's like a modern adaptation with some Queen influence in it. A lot of stacked vocals, and anyway, yeah, it took a couple years for the music of Queen to really get into my own art.
I also noticed, of course, besides the videos with over 50 million plays on YouTube, that you play several instruments. Do you have like one in particular you grew up with or your favorite?
Yeah, piano was my first instrument. I started taking lessons at the age of 6. And I continued taking lessons into university. I taught myself the guitar. I was the guitar player actually in my band. I wasn't even the piano player.
Oh.
But now that I'm playing mostly Queen's music, I've actually become a better piano player. I played a little bit of trumpet in high school, but I have not kept up with it. But yeah. I wish I played the violin. That's the one thing I wish I'd learned, but I don't have a second lifetime to learn how to be a good violin player.
You ever took voice lessons after the whole Freddie Mercury comparisons and all that?
No, never taken voice lessons. I've met with vocal coaches to help me with vocal problems. When I went to we did our first big tour in Germany in 2020, actually, right before the pandemic. And I got sick in Germany in January in 2020, and I lost my voice for the very first time in my life, and I panicked. I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And we had to cancel 5 shows while we were in Germany. And after that, I met with a vocal coach here where I live a couple times just to help myself warm up better and to be prepared to sing. But here's the thing: I've always sung when I was sick and been fine, even if my voice was a little bit rough. But I had never lost my voice completely, and that was very scary. So that's what made me take a couple of just vocal health lessons. But no, I never took vocal lessons. It was always just my love for singing and trying to learn from other singers.
And how did you end up cast for the voice for Freddie for the Bohemian Rhapsody movie?
I had a relationship with Queen for 6 years or so before that, and so the way this whole thing started for me was I auditioned for Roger Taylor and Brian May to be in the official Queen tribute band called the Queen Extravaganza, and they're still touring today. So I got to work very closely with Roger Taylor, especially for 5 or 6 years, and I learned from the best. I learned how to do the music of Queen the way that Queen wants to do it. Of course, that's important. But and so when the movie got approved, they had told me beforehand, many years before, like they told me in 2012 that they were making this movie, and 4 years later, I finally got a phone call from the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody saying, we need you to fly to London. We're going to record at Abbey Road Studios, and we need you to help with the vocals. So yeah, it was really amazing.
What was Roger's feedback? Like, I'm trying to understand his perspective on this. You know, like
Yeah,
you're playing voice of his friend, his colleague, singer of the
yeah.
band.
It's
What was his
incredibly
feedback?
emotional. It's incredibly emotional for him. I've witnessed him, with tears in his eyes more than once. Um, a couple of experiences that I had with him when we were rehearsing under pressure for the first time in 2012 with the band, the Queen Extravaganza, and in that part where Freddie goes, and I hit that note, and Roger was at the back of the room, just very concentrating, and he's like, man, I hope they do this well. It's an important song. And as soon as I hit that top note, he goes, yes.
Man.
And another memory I had was when Roger and Brian came in to the studio at Abbey Road when we were just finishing our work on the movie. They came to listen to the stuff that we had done, and we played one of the songs for him. I forget which one it was. It may have been Live Aid or something like that. And we had spent all day on it, and the producer said, Roger, would you like to hear something that we've done? And so we played it for him, and he's just getting very emotional and wiping away tears. Can't imagine what that feels like for him. And then at the end, he said, Marc, how much of that was you? And I'm like, that was all me. It's like, oh no, he couldn't even barely tell the difference. So that's when it's pretty wild.
Hearing that from the people of the band itself, it's got to be also a huge experience for you, emotional also.
Yeah, it's almost too much for me to process. It's very strange. It's one of the biggest bands of all time, and it's a very intimate moment. It's hard to put into words.
In the movie, you do the singing, or you also do any part of the conversation as Freddie's voice?
No, Rami did all of the, the talking.
Okay.
But they mixed me in where they needed me in the movie. In the end, well, while I was doing my work in London, they hadn't begun filming the movie yet. So everything I did was before. And they weren't sure if they were going to use all of my work or mix it in with Freddie recordings. And in the end, they used as much Freddie as they could, and they used me in the scenes where they didn't have any Freddie Mercury recordings.
Do you have a favorite moment you recorded for the movie Bohemian Rhapsody that you remember particularly, being in the cinema and watching the movie and saying, that's me?
Well, I can't tell you exactly where I sang for legal reasons.
Okay.
But,
I'll edit this part of the interview.
Yeah, it's yeah, but I'll tell you what, watching the movie for the first time, I watched it in a theater with just my wife and my manager, and I could hear myself. Obviously, I can tell the difference immediately, but they couldn't. And every time there was a singing scene, my manager would look over at me and go, "Is that you? Is that?" And then I go, "Yeah, that's me." So when even my wife and my manager can't tell, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, what a life experience. I remember a few years ago I read that Dave Turner from Soul Asylum did the voice of John Lennon for a movie. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't remember the name of the movie, man. I'm sure you can Google it and find it.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't notice at all. But,
interesting.
But yeah, Dave Turner from Soul Asylum did John Lennon for a movie. So
That's funny. I've heard that the Soul Asylum guys are big Beatles fans, because I have a friend producer who worked with them, who's always talking about how much they love the Beatles.
Oh, well, there you have.
Yeah.
You have to Google that.
Yep.
Perhaps watch the movie and compare his John Lennon to your Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I don't even know what that movie's called.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. Sorry about that. That part wasn't prepared for this interview. But since you like brunch, Well, Mark, I don't want to take much of your time. I'm pretty sure you have several interviews. So, first of all, it's been a real pleasure having you with us here in Radioacktiva. I'm really looking forward for the show, man.
Awesome, man. Great chatting with you, Julio. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
That's it, man. Thank you very much. And once again, have a very nice day.
You too, sir.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.